Trauma doesn't just sit in the back of your mind like a bad memory. It physically and neurologically rewires your entire operating system. Think of it like a software update that you never asked for, but your brain installed anyway just to keep you alive. When you are a trauma-born empath, the label sensitive is actually a massive understatement. You aren't just feeling things more deeply, you are operating with a high-definition radar that most people don't even know exists. While others walk into a room and notice the decor or the music, you walk into a room and unconsciously perform a full-scale tactical scan. You aren't looking for the exit signs, you're looking for the emotional exits. You are tracking the invisible tension between a couple in the corner, the forced smile on the host's face, and the exact moment the energy in the room shifts from relaxed to restrictive. This hyper-awareness isn't a personality quirk. It is a sophisticated survival mechanism. At some point in your past, your safety depended on your ability to predict the unpredictable. If you grew up in an environment where a parent's mood could flip like a switch, or where peace was a fragile, temporary state, your brain realized that being average at reading people wasn't enough. You had to become an expert. You had to learn to interpret the slightest tightening of a jaw, the specific pitch of a footstep, or the heavy silence that precedes a storm. You weren't overthinking back then. You were gathering intelligence. You were calculating the odds of a conflict before it even started, so you could adjust your behavior, shrink yourself, or prepare for impact. As an adult, this means you are constantly reading between the lines of every single interaction, often without even trying. You pick up on the micro-glitches in human behavior, the split-second inconsistency where someone's words say, "I'm fine," but their pupils, their posture, and their energy are screaming that they are resentful. To the average person, this looks like magic or paranoia, but to you, it's just data. You are seeing the raw code behind the social mask. This is high-level pattern recognition that was forged in a pressure cooker. Your brain became exceptionally efficient at identifying threats, but in this case, the threat isn't a predator in the woods, it's the emotional volatility of the people around you. The reality is that you are navigating a world of whispers while everyone else is only listening to the shouts. This level of perception is exhausting because your radar never truly turns off. You are absorbing the atmospheric pressure of every room you enter, calculating shifts in energy with the precision of a weather satellite. You've mastered the art of the gap, that tiny space between what a person intends to project and what they are actually feeling. Because safety was once a moving target for you, your brain refuses to stop tracking it. You have been conditioned to believe that if you stop scanning, you might get hurt. So you remain the silent observer, the one who knows exactly what's going on under the surface, holding a level of insight that is both a profound gift and a heavy, involuntary burden. To the outside world, your depth of perception is often mislabeled as a flaw. People look at you and see someone who is too sensitive, someone who takes everything to heart, or someone who just can't seem to let things go. But that interpretation is a total misunderstanding of the biological hardware you're running. You aren't simply feeling more in a way that makes you fragile. You are detecting more because your sensors are tuned to a frequency most people can't even hear. It's not that you are being dramatic or choosing to be affected by the atmosphere. It's that your brain is physically unable to ignore the data it's collecting. While the average person navigates a conversation like they're reading a children's book, taking words at face value and moving on, you are reading a complex technical manual. You are processing the spoken word, the tone of voice, the body language, and the hidden intent all at the same time. You aren't reacting more than others. You are simply aware of 10 times the information they are. This level of precision is actually a superpower of detection, but it comes with a massive hidden tax. Because your brain is so focused on gathering this data for your survival, it often forgets to build a wall between you and the information you're receiving. This is where the lack of natural boundaries becomes a crisis. Most people have a built-in emotional skin that keeps other people's moods from entering their own system. For a traumaborn empath, that skin is often missing or paper thin. When you walk into a room where someone is boiling with silent rage, you don't just notice it, you absorb it. Their anger literally becomes your physical unease. Their frantic stress becomes a tightening in your chest. You are essentially a human sponge in a world full of spilled emotions. And because you can't help but soak it all up, you end up carrying the weight of rooms you only walk through for 5 minutes. This constant influx of external data leads to a specific kind of soul-crushing psychological fatigue that most people will never understand. It's a quiet, heavy exhaustion that comes from being the unpaid emotional janitor of every environment you enter. Without even realizing it, you spend your day-to-day life managing emotional climates that aren't even your responsibility. You're subconsciously trying to fix the tension in the air or smooth over someone's discomfort just so your own nervous system can finally stop ringing the alarm. You are working a full-time job of emotional regulation for everyone around you just to find a second of peace for yourself. This isn't weakness, it's a massive expenditure of energy. You are running a high-performance engine at redline levels just to survive a normal social interaction, and that is why you feel so drained while everyone else seems perfectly fine. The tragedy of this misunderstanding is that you might have started to believe the lie that your awareness makes you broken. You might feel like you're too much for people to handle, or that you're just not built for the world. But the reality is that you are operating with a level of insight that is incredibly rare. The problem isn't your detection system. The problem is the sheer volume of noise you're forced to process without a filter. You aren't failing at being a person. You are succeeding at a level of awareness that would paralyze most people. Understanding that your sensitivity is actually a high-definition detection tool is the first step toward reclaiming your energy. You have to realize that just because you can feel everything doesn't mean you're responsible for managing everything. Your exhaustion isn't a sign of a weak character. It's a sign of a powerful system that hasn't been taught how to turn its sensors off. The secret to flipping the script on your life, moving from being a victim of your sensitivity to a master of it, lies in a single powerful shift, moving from absorption to observation. For most of your life, you have lived like a sponge. You walk into a room and you soak up every drop of tension, every hidden resentment, and every ounce of anxiety lingering in the air. You don't just notice these things, you take them into your body until you are heavy, saturated, and dripping with everyone else's emotional baggage. But the power of discernment begins the moment you decide to stop being the sponge and start being the witness. Instead of letting the energy enter your system, you learn to keep it at arm's length. You observe the anger in the room like a scientist watching a chemical reaction through a glass pane. You see it, you recognize it, and you analyze it, but you don't let it touch your skin. This is how you transform a painful burden into a precision tool. Suddenly, your ability to read people isn't something that drains you. It's a high-level intelligence that allows you to navigate life with a clarity that most people will never possess. This shift in perspective finally explains the deep, almost desperate craving you have for solitude. For years, you might have felt guilty about wanting to be alone, or perhaps people labeled you as antisocial or reclusive. But you need to understand that for a trauma-born empath, solitude has nothing to do with hating people. It is about the absolute necessity of silence. When you are alone, your nervous system finally gets to clock out. It's the only time your radar isn't being bombarded by thousands of data points from the people around you. In the quiet, you aren't required to process, interpret, or emotionally manage anyone else's reality. Solitude is the charging station for your soul. It's the only environment where you can actually hear your own voice, distinguish your own feelings from the noise of the world, and let your nervous system come down from its constant state of high alert. You aren't closing yourself off from the world because you're cold. You're closing yourself off from chaos to protect your sanity. Think of your energy like a limited currency. Every time you're around people, you are spending that currency on processing their hidden layers. By the time you get home, you're bankrupted. Choosing to be selective with your time and your circle isn't a sign of weakness, it's high-level discernment. You've reached a point where you realize that not all connection is created equal. You have zero interest in the surface-level noise of small talk, fake smiles, and social performances because your brain is wired to see right through them. To you, those interactions feel like eating empty calories. They provide no nourishment and only leave you feeling more tired. This is why your standards for connection have become so high. You don't want polite conversations. You want depth, or you want nothing at all. You want interactions that are honest, raw, and real. Connections where you don't have to filter your perceptions or manage the other person's ego. If a relationship doesn't offer that level of substance, you would genuinely rather be alone, and that is perfectly okay. Once you stop apologizing for your need for space and your distaste for the superficial, you start to see that your exclusivity is actually your greatest protection. You are no longer a wide-open door for every passing emotional storm. You are a gatekeeper. By choosing depth over noise, you are finally honoring the complexity of your own mind and giving yourself the peace you were denied for so long. The friction you feel in your relationships isn't a sign that you are broken. It's the result of a fundamental relational mismatch. Most people move through life on the surface, wearing social masks and relying on a script of superficial politeness to get by. They are comfortable in the shallow end. But you, by the very nature of your trauma-born perception, operate at the bottom of the ocean. You don't just hear their words, you feel their hesitations. You see the flicker of insecurity in their eyes, and you sense the gap between who they are pretending to be and who they actually are. This creates a massive problem in standard social settings. Your presence alone acts like a high-powered spotlight. Whether you say anything or not, people instinctively feel that you can see through their defenses. This creates a silent, heavy psychological pressure. They realize their mask doesn't work on you. And for many people, that is absolutely terrifying. Because most people aren't ready to be truly seen, they react to your depth by trying to make it a you problem. This is where the labels come from. They will call you too intense, too serious, or tell you that you're overanalyzing everything. It's important that you understand the truth behind these words. These aren't objective critiques of your character. They are defensive maneuvers. When someone calls you too intense, what they are really saying is, I don't have the internal tools to handle the level of honesty you bring to the table. When they say you're overanalyzing, they mean, I am uncomfortable that you noticed something I was trying to hide. They aren't criticizing your flaws. They are highlighting their own limitations. They are essentially asking you to dim your light so their own lack of self-awareness doesn't feel so obvious. This mismatch creates a painful cycle where you feel like you're constantly too much for the people you care about. You might find yourself apologizing for your insights or trying to dumb down your emotional intelligence just to make others feel comfortable. But you have to realize that you are essentially trying to fit a high-definition signal into an old black and white television set. The picture is going to be distorted, not because the signal is bad, but because the receiver doesn't have the bandwidth to process it. You aren't too much. You are simply operating on a frequency that requires a high level of emotional maturity, honesty, and stability to sustain. Not everyone has done the work to build that kind of capacity. Most people are actually terrified of the very depth that you consider your baseline. Instead of leaning into the connection, many people will subtly retreat or pull away because being around you requires them to confront parts of themselves they aren't ready to face. It's easier for them to label you as difficult than it is for them to be vulnerable. You have to stop viewing their withdrawal as a personal rejection and start seeing it as a lack of alignment. Depth requires capacity. If someone doesn't have the emotional lung capacity to dive deep with you, they will keep floating back to the surface. That isn't your fault, and it isn't something you can fix by shrinking yourself. Once you accept that your depth is a standard rather than a burden, you stop chasing people who are only equipped for the shallow end. You realize that you don't need to be less. You just need to find the people who aren't afraid of the view from the bottom of the ocean. The single greatest threat to your well-being isn't the toxic person in your life or the chaotic world outside. It is the silent, gradual process of self-abandonment. Because your brain was wired in the trenches of trauma, you have developed a nearly supernatural ability to understand the why behind everyone's behavior. You can see the wounded child inside the aggressive boss. You can trace your partner's coldness back to their own distant parents. But here is the trap. Your high-level intelligence has become a weapon used against yourself. You have fallen into the habit of using your insight to build bridges for people who are busy burning yours down. Because you can explain their bad behavior, you mistakenly feel like you have to excuse it. You spent years rationalizing the inexcusable, telling yourself that if you just understand them well enough, you can tolerate the pain they cause. You need to hear this clearly. Understanding someone's why does not give them a free pass to disrespect your what. Just because you know they are hurting doesn't mean you have to be their punching bag. This cycle continues because you have been conditioned to believe that maintaining harmony is the ultimate goal. You think that by keeping the peace, you are being the bigger person, the kind soul, or the healer. But if that peace requires you to swallow your own voice, ignore your gut, and endure emotional mistreatment, it isn't peace. It's a hostage situation. When you prioritize an external environment's stability over your own internal safety, you aren't being kind. You are committing an act of self-betrayal. You are effectively telling your own nervous system that everyone else's comfort is more important than your survival. This is how you lose yourself. You become so busy managing their needs, anticipating their moods, and softening the world for them that you become a ghost in your own life. The real shift, the moment you take your power back, happens when you change the fundamental question you ask yourself. You must stop asking, "What do they need from me to feel okay?" and start asking, "What is this interaction costing me?" If the cost is your sleep, your self-esteem, or your sanity, the price is too high. This leads to what I call the 1% shift, the narrow path where the most empowered empaths walk. These individuals haven't turned off their empathy or become cold. They have simply refined it into a sharp, protective tool. They've realized that empathy without boundaries is actually self-destruction. To join this 1%, you have to stop being accountable for the emotional maturity of grown adults. It is not your job to be a prosthetic nervous system for people who refuse to heal themselves. You must learn the art of caring without carrying. You can feel for someone, you can wish them well, and you can even understand their pain, all while standing firmly behind a boundary that says, you cannot bring that chaos in here. This isn't about building a wall to keep the world out. It's about building a floor so you have somewhere solid to stand. Ultimately, the goal of your healing journey was never to become less sensitive or to disconnect from humanity. The goal was to reconnect with yourself so deeply that you no longer require self-sacrifice to maintain a connection with others. You spent a lifetime being a master of everyone else's internal world. It is time to become the master of your own. When you finally turn that powerful, high-definition radar inward, you start to notice your own hunger, your own exhaustion, and your own forgotten dreams. You begin to realize that the most important person in the room, the one who actually needs your empathy, your protection, and your fierce loyalty, is you. Empathy is a devastating burden when it's directed only outward, but it becomes a genuine superpower the moment you decide that you are finally worthy of your own compassion. Your new standard is simple. If a connection requires you to abandon yourself, it isn't a connection. It's a trade, and you are no longer interested in the deal. The journey of a trauma-born empath is often one of returning to a home you never knew you had, yourself. You spent the first half of your life mastering the art of survival by becoming an expert on everyone else. You learned to read the air, the eyes, and the energy of every room just to stay safe. But the second half of your life is about something much more powerful. It's about mastery. It's about taking that incredible high-definition perception and using it to build a life of absolute clarity. You are not a victim of your depth, and you are not too much for this world. You are simply a rare breed of human who sees the truth behind the mask. And once you stop apologizing for that, the world starts to move at your pace, not theirs. You have to realize that your peace is non-negotiable. You've already paid the price of admission through the fires of your past. You don't need to keep paying for it by sacrificing your energy to people who don't have the capacity to value it. The goal isn't to change who you are, it's to change where you stand. When you stand in your own power, with your boundaries locked and your vision clear, your empathy stops being a leak that drains you and starts being a compass that guides you. You are the architect of your emotional space, and you have every right to decide who is worthy of your depth and who only gets the surface.